of town council, I would remind everyone, I think we are on recorder.
That's true.
The recorder's on, so smile, be pleasant. And you have an agenda that was emailed out to you. Request a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved, seconded, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting of June 11th. What is council's wish?
I move they be approved and circulated, your worship.
I'll second that, your worship.
Moved and seconded. On the question. I'll look at Penny as I say that. All in favor? Motion carried. We now have a delegation. Ben Buckwold and Nabila Cheddar. Welcome. Nice to see you. And they're going to be talking to us about, they're from Bicycle Nova Scotia, talking about active transportation.
That's right. Great.
Presentation is loaded.
Yeah, we're loaded and ready to go. I'll just open it up. And we're going to kind of do this together, so I'll start it off.
And you know that you have 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
We are going to, you're not counting yet, are you?
She counts.
Okay. Okay, now you can start counting. We'll do our best. Okay, thanks very much. So, yeah, thanks for having us here on your agenda this evening. We really appreciate the opportunity to share with Council the Lyrid Hubs Bikeway Study. This is work we're doing in Mahone Bay, and we've been working kind of on it really since July of 2018. And we're working with several communities on the South Shore, Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, and Bridgewater. And here we've really been working with a local steering committee. Dylan has been involved, and Derek and some community members have been helping us. So it is a great opportunity to bring council into the project, bring you up to date, get some engagement on the work that's been completed so far. And we're also interested in getting some, if we can, some direction from council about kind of the next steps in advancing the recommendations that we've put forward in this work thus far. So we are from Bicycle Nova Scotia, which is a province-wide not-for-profit organization. We have a very broad mandate towards improving conditions, the experience of cycling of all kinds in Nova Scotia. But this project really focuses on the work we do to try to make cycling more accessible for people to use as part of their daily lives, whether that's a form of transportation or kind of unstructured recreation. One of the things that we see in Nova Scotia is the biggest barrier to making cycling more accessible is the quality of the infrastructure, the safety of the infrastructure, and just the comfort of the experience. A lot of people find the stress of cycling in traffic just to be too much to make it something that is really enjoyable and practical for them. So this work with Mahone Bay and the other communities is an opportunity for us to help communities understand their potential to modify and develop infrastructure to reduce some of that traffic stress and make cycling an option for more people in the community, and hopefully to bring a lot of benefits to the community as well, if this work can be completed. So our project goals, one of the most important things we're doing is we're taking this lens of all ages and abilities, bicycle users. So as opposed to the people you might see cycling often, we're really thinking about younger people and older people, having more women cycling potentially, and some of the demographics that are underrepresented in cycling currently. And what we're doing is we're working on a network plan for route improvements in each community to think about where could you focus energy to make improvements that would make cycling more accessible. And then from that, we are doing an in-depth evaluation of one route within that network and making recommendations or suggestions for how a project could be put in place. So I will just quickly mention this work is funded by the Department of Energy and Mines and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Their interest in this work is helping communities reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector, which is becoming an increasingly large part of Nova Scotia's overall greenhouse gas emissions. So in terms of thinking about cycling and transportation, and it's often disregarded, I think, but there's some research that's been done that looks at different categories of people who ride bicycles, and what this research has found can kind of replicate in a lot of places. There's about 1% of a population that will ride their bike basically anywhere in any condition. About 7% of people who are kind of riding reasonably regularly now, they don't like riding in traffic, but they will if they have to. But there's this huge chunk of the population that's kind of interested in cycling, but they really don't like traffic stress, so they're not doing it now. So we think there's kind of a large group of people that we can actually appeal to who would really benefit from having different types of cycling infrastructure and less stress. So in order to do that, there's a couple general principles that Nabila, who's our engineer, is applying through this work. And one of them is at speeds of 30 kilometers an hour or less, it's often reasonable to mix cyclists and motor vehicles. But at speeds higher than that, it's become very important in the design guidance to start separating cyclists from motor vehicles. One of the big things there is that there's been substantial safety gains noted. So if there is a collision between a cyclist and a motor vehicle, at 30 kilometers an hour or less, there's greatly reduced incidence of like serious injury or fatalities. And it's also related to the comfort of those different facilities. So when we're thinking about appealing to people of all ages and all abilities, there's really new types of facilities that are being looked at, and they're not, we've seen a lot of paint on the ground and treating cyclists as motor vehicles and maybe designing bike lanes or putting just paint on the roads, but there's kind of a few different facility types that we're trying to look at ways to bring into communities here. And they're kind of up on the slide now. I don't want to dwell on them too much, but these are really just ways to either create appropriate conditions for mixed traffic, like 30 kilometers an hour, or to separate by using a protected bicycle lane on a road, or a bicycle path or a multi-use path, which will come up in this presentation. So that's the introduction to where this project comes from, the perspective we're taking, and I'm going to pass it off to Nabila, who will walk you through the work that's been done thus far.
Yeah, so just to loop it back a little bit, we kind of see our project as having two distinct parts. So the first part is that network planning piece, and the second part is the concept design, which is the stuff we've been working on more recently. And then, of course, through all of that, we're really using that all ages and abilities lens. So this is kind of like a roadmap that shows where we've been going with the project. You can kind of see where we are in that process, like a little more than halfway. And we're hoping to get to that final portion by the end of August. Just wanted to give a quick recap on like the network planning report, as I'm not sure if everyone has ever had a chance to see it. So this was kind of developed based on our analysis. We looked at some things like the speeds and the traffic volumes and the destinations, but we also incorporated feedback from our stakeholder committee as well. And so from that, we used that to pick our route to go forward for the concept design. So we wanted to pick kind of a route that had some short-term implementation feasibility, and so this route was seen as being a really key connection for residents who lived in that east neighborhood to get to the school. And we also saw there were a lot of like destinations in that east neighborhood, like the Mahone Bay Center and others that would be really good to connect to the residences. And the second component, so that focus on having that safe and comfortable route for students to cycle on their own was the most important part. And then the secondary part was that we also wanted to have a good route for tourists to enter the town. So something that's like really comfortable and still has that same low stress and also provides that wayfinding for tourists to enter town. And so that's where that route came from. And one of the really key important parts you'll kind of see on the dotted lines, we just wanted to show that connection between Kinburn Street and Clearway is one of the parts that we see is the most important. And there were kind of two options that came up. So one of them was Spur Street and the other one was the NSLC parking lot, which we know is a strong desire line for all modes, that they're shortcutting done by cars, bikes, and pedestrians. So that's one element that will probably have to be considered with input from NSLC as a stakeholder.
So if, just in case people aren't able to see you can probably see, but there's outlined here, we have Claremont, Kinburn Street connecting to Clearway as kind of the main corridor, just in case that's not super clear.
And so going back to kind of that, really looking at the data, we did some collection on the traffic volumes and speeds of the area. So I think these might not be super visible as well, but one of the key thing that we kind of got is all these roads, people are, they're going around the speed limit, which is a good thing, but 50 kilometers per hour is a bit too high for like a lot of people to feel comfortable sharing the road with traffic. And as well as that safety piece as well. That was something that got our attention. And then the other portion was that Main Street is a very busy road, and that it really needs that like physical separation for people to feel comfortable using it.
So you can note just kind of interest here, like the speed that was counted by the other firm go out and do some counting, and they found it was 47 kilometers an hour is the average speed on Clearway Street, which is in a school zone. So they're, on average, people are going faster than they should within the school zone. So there's some.
As we talked about earlier this week, but I just got to jump in and say, because noted in our staff report, that is probably showing the difference between behavior when you know you're on the speed sign and behavior when you don't. Because our counts were showing pretty good adherence, that's when people are showing up on the speed sign. So interesting to see that when they're not, it's 47.
So just kind of generally walk through some of the concept ideas. So for Claremont and Kinburn Street, we were interested in using an advisory bicycle lane. So it's kind of a way of delineating how to share the car and the bicycle space. So the two-way car traffic is allowed, but they share like a center lane, and if another car approaches, they move over into the bicycle lane. So that's why the lines for the bicycle lane are dashed instead of solid. So on a road like that, the speed would be posted at 30. That kind of that navigation would hopefully cause some amount of like speed reduction. We also saw this as a way. The other benefit that we saw is this would also be a strong wayfinding component as well.
We're just about at the end of our time.
We're almost done.
Yeah, and then for Main Street, we kind of talked about how the separation was really important. So we're proposing increasing the width of a sidewalk so it can become a multi-use pathway, so that that's wide enough for cyclists and pedestrians to share the road.
And this is on Main between Clearway and the NSLC, or Clearway and Spur, depending on that.
Yeah,
just
exactly. Yeah, and a really important part of that part is a really important section is like that intersection treatment between at Main Street and Clearway, just to create like that safe crossing, as we've heard that there's quite a lot of people currently have issues crossing it. So, so one option we're considering is a raised intersection, among others. So aside from like that safety component of trying to get drivers to yield better to cyclists and pedestrians, we also were kind of looking at a way to really show that transition from like your rural environment into the built environment of the town. And then as well for Clearway Street, we found that it was one of the busier roads along the route, and kind of based on some of that guidance we looked at, it would be preferable to have separation and not share the road. So we're also suggesting increasing the width of the sidewalk that already exists, and creating a multi-use path there as well. And we're hoping to build that out all the way to the trail. Again, for that, the connection for the students to use the trails, I've heard that they use the trail as well quite frequently, and then also for that route for tourists to come in.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, we're just about out of time, maybe, but your question, Councillor Carver?
Well, it was specifically about that sidewalk. If it's
Yeah.
widened, then is it demarcated in some way to separate the pedestrians from the cyclists?
Yeah, so we consider that as an option as well, but there's not, without like significant work, there's not enough width for that. Yeah, but there is, so there should be enough space for that navigation between cyclists and pedestrians. With that, like it's more ideal if you can have a segregation, because you can avoid conflicts when it's like really highly used. Like if you have, let's say, all your students walking on it at once, and then you have a cyclist.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely, the way we've kind of been looking at it, it's definitely better for like your cyclists to share with pedestrians versus sharing with like your several thousand-pound vehicle.
Then how do you get around the idea that a cyclist is supposed to be like treated like a car? I.e. traveling on the road, not on a sidewalk.
Well, I mean, I guess like the multi-use path treatment is part of the kind of standard road design that's used in urban areas these days. So I think it would be within kind of the realm of what a lot of people are used to. It wouldn't look like a sidewalk. It would look more like a pathway, and we'd want to do and you could use signage or even consider using markings on the actual pathway itself to indicate that it is a space to be shared by bicycles and pedestrians.
Yeah, and usually when you use a multi-use path, cyclists have to yield to pedestrians, so that's one of the important operating requirements of it.
I think one of the issues for us is that many of our pedestrians are seniors who are very much unaccustomed to confronting a bicyclist on the same strip that they're walking on. Young people, students, yes, I'm certain they're quite comfortable with it. I'm not sure if the senior walkers would be. I'm not trying to prejudge them, but
Maybe
think
that's
that's
a
one
good
of the
case for the trial run being Clearway Street.
yeah.
If we were to pick a street to try.
But I would rather see us make it a little bit wider and be able to accommodate than not. Councillor Bain?
When I look at Kinburn and so on, and this, single lane down the center and then yielding if somebody's coming, we really have a car parking problem on some of our streets, and I don't know in the big picture if you could ever get the width to sort of make that work.
And the road narrows,
And
unfortunately,
the
and the
roads
bridge.
are very narrow, which of course is a problem. I mean, it's a problem for us as it stands today without trying to accommodate cyclists. So I mean, something would really have to be worked out in that to accommodate, because if, things at the fire hall, things at the
Yep.
ball field, I mean, that street is loaded.
It's busy.
During the summer at the ball field, that road's parked on both sides down, so.
And it's difficult enough to even
Get
get
through.
your vehicles down through the
That's right.
fire trucks. And so. Anyway, that's not necessarily a negative comment. It's more of the reality of our little town here.
So your Blue Route, the study that you're doing will continue. Will you come back with firmer recommendations at some point, or?
Yeah, I think what we're interested in hearing, does this seem like the idea of connecting, Claremont, Kinburn to Clearway via a section of Main Street? Is that worth pursuing? Is there an interest in pursuing that? And then we can go into a little bit more of the details of how those, like you both described good points, mixing of different types of users, widths, for Claremont and Kinburn. And we could produce some more detail. And the other thing we were going to do is provide some very high level costing information. So that's the other thing that we are really trying to take into account here is treatments that, there would be some cost. We do have a fairly good level of confidence that there are partners in the provincial government and federal government that would be interested in seeing a community try to put in place some of this all ages and abilities type infrastructure and really make a bit of a showcase project for a town in Nova Scotia. I think it is a really strong opportunity Mahone Bay has, and in part because you have the Bay to Bay Trail, which is so popular, and a really strong link between that and the community. I think it's got a tourism component, but also just allowing residents to access it more easily. There are advantages there.
And the Dynamite Trail is even more extensive than the
Exactly.
Bay.
Councillor O'Neill, you had a question?
Very briefly, and it is a question about the trails. In one of the last meetings on the topic, there was a conversation about connectivity with the Foxburg Road, Fobo Road, and I wondered where that went in terms of tourist wayfinding and trail connectivity. It doesn't seem to be on the table. Was it excluded from your final design?
So we did, I think you might have noticed there with the traffic volumes and speed, we did collect data on both of those. And at our last meeting, we were talking about extending it. So we haven't completely confirmed that, but hopeful that we can include it within the scope of our project.
I think
I
the
know,
Pond Street to Hedge Road to Pleasant to Faubourg is still the discussed connection from the section we just talked about to the other trail connection if you wanted to go out to Lunenburg on Faubourg. And you probably use many of the same techniques. So, like for example, if that suggested bike lane worked on Kinburn, Faubourg is a very similar street. Conditions are similar, so it might serve to work there as well.
Faster traffic on Faubourg.
There shouldn't be, but there is.
There certainly is.
Yeah, more need for it. More need for it up
Yeah,
there.
just a comment, I mean, as chair of the town's age-friendly community committee, and which now has an all-age focus, I mean, we've heard the concerns around children going to school, so I can certainly see the appeal and the usefulness of something like this, although I'm a little bit staggered by how you manage the traffic and the narrow streets, but I'd love to see it happen. It would be,
They're going to bring us the good news the
Yeah.
next time. Great. Thank you very much for coming to talk with us.
All right,
Appreciate it.
appreciate it. Thanks very much.
So one area that will probably come back up with me asking sooner rather than later is about our talking to NSLC. So do expect me to come back and ask how council feels about our approaching NSLC in that regard. I'm not going to do it now. I'll bring up a separate report, but we haven't gone past the very initial conversation with them. But clearly, it would be a great opportunity for a bike connection if we were serious about promoting that cycling route.
Yep.
They have a gate now.
They have a gate across the site now.
They don't care about cyclists. That's not what they're trying to gate out.
Yeah.
So hopefully, there's
Okay.
more.
Item next, we have correspondence. We have a letter from from T.A. Dickinson. Chip
I don't
Dickinson?
know. Chip.
Requesting a volunteer donation meter in proximity to the tables installed by the Lions Club next to the public comfort station on Edgewater Street, across from the Irving Station. Did you want to?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say about this is that there is an increasing number of these on private property in town. I would imagine the more that there are, the town has a number of prominent locations, some of which are already affiliated with nonprofits. This one in particular, that they have, as they noted, already installed some furniture for public benefit there. And similarly, we have a nonprofit operating wharf in the Wood Boat Society. So the town is likely to, be setting a precedent with however this is handled. For that reason, council may wish to request a staff report to give further consideration, or if you're supportive of this, we'll take it as a bit of a precedent with regards to other requests of this nature.
There's no timings associated with this. Would this be considered a permanent structure? Or is it time limited?
I think that we would be, in conveying permission, able to specify if it was a permanent thing. But the installations are concrete, so it's a bit to get them
I
out,
would
but-
expect them that they would be hoping to have a permanent. Deputy Mayor?
I'm just starting to worry we're gonna have these things popping up everywhere. I mean, I love the Lions Club. They're a great town supporter. Give them one. Then we're gonna have Heritage Boat Co-op come for one. I think it's gonna snowball on us. We have probably 4 over there now.
I think there's 5 in town already.
No, but I mean, there must be 4 over there. See,
on Edgewater.
yeah,
Edgewater.
There's 2 by the
You know.
parking lots, I think.
There's the art,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. So that's what I mean. Like I say, they do fantastic work. But we open it up for one, or it could be have a lineup going look like they were meter in the street. That's my personal opinion.
I think we have actually, to your point, there are a number already.
On private property.
Oh, on private, so this would be the first one on public. Okay.
The CAO and I were talking about this the other day, and the suggestion came up of having, if the parking meters were on public property, they would not belong to any one particular group, but that the revenue from the parking would go into an appropriate bank account, and they would be distributed in addition to the grant program that's handled at budget time. So we could put a meter down at the wharf, we could have a meter at the comfort station. And at March 31st, distribute the money to the identified charities or whatever it is in town. That might become difficult as to who it is.
That just gives me an idea, which is to limit it to 2 and to do it for the comfort stations. It would be like a penny for your comfort station, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that it would limit it to those 2 places, and both of them are, well, would benefit if we shared the proceeds or dedicated the proceeds to those 2, the wooden boat and the Lions, because they're both right there.
It'd be up to the, you know, right now these meters are purchased and donated by Lynn Hennigan. I understand the cost of them is $500 a piece. These meters, so I think it'll be up to whether she's going to donate one to the Wooden Book. That's why I know she's already approached the last one. I think that's why this came
Boat
forward.
Festival could buy one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but that could be the limit. That could be the limit. I mean, if you
Yeah.
okay this one on that basis,
Yeah,
it's
and
beside
possibly
it's
for
beside the comfort station, so it on town property.
I mean, I
That's
wouldn't
my
be surprised
suggestion.
if the bandstand would get a request as well.
Yeah,
Prominent
you're,
spot.
yeah. I kind of agree that, and shouldn't say kind of agree, I agree that it becomes very difficult to say to the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th parking meter, no, you can't have it on public property.
But if it's limited to those 2 comfort stations, period, that would, in my view, that would be it.
But with whom would you share the revenues from those 2 meters?
Well, it could either be a kind of a formula that you suggested, or that the 2 closest, if the Wooden Boat Society wants to have one, they could ask or make arrangements.
So the town would purchase and install the parking
No, they
meters?
would.
No?
It would be their responsibility to do it
Okay.
on town property. I don't know where this one's gonna come from.
yeah, I don't think we should, you know, get involved in purchasing and
Okay.
installing the meters.
I don't know, I kind of like the idea, I hadn't actually considered that, but if the town is going to be putting meters on public property, it really serves as a small revenue stream for our grants, process.
Not,
And-
not
and
to
line
replace the
items.
money that we would normally give to the grants, we'll still give that
Indeed.
money,
Right,
but this would be in addition to.
indeed.
Yeah.
I personally like that as an idea. I think that's worth looking into.
Maybe we should ask staff to
Yeah,
have a
should
look
get a
at
staff
that.
report.
Councillor Bain?
I basically agree with what Councillor Nass has said, but I guess if there can be tight enough criteria developed, staff could look at it, like
Okay.
we're considering, but I'm still concerned about a lot of these yellow mushrooms sprouting up all over the
Yeah.
place. You know.
So would the direction to staff be to investigate the possibility of having 2 of those, one of those meters installed at each of the 2 comfort stations?
We're developing a criteria for doing it, period, so that we do have a way of saying no, or, you know.
On
however-
public property, yeah, that we could say you have to abide by this criteria if it's gonna be on public property. If it was on private property, it's really not a whole lot we can do.
Not much we can do about that. That's what we've got out there now.
I don't know what the
Sure.
cost of these things are, but there's gonna be some people that are.
Richard said
I-
500.
That's what I heard, was $500. It's the cost.
Well, that could be a limiting factor right there. But anyway, I'm a bit concerned about how you carve up the money, and I mean, there's only so much change floating around. And
No?
let's face it, we got lots of events you go to that they have their hand out.
What is the wish of council?
I'll move that, refer it to staff for a staff report.
Second that.
Moved and seconded?
Yeah, and I would like to see some consideration given to my suggestion, which I'm still quite attached to, because, partly because this conversation has been stimulated by a request from the Lions Club. So, is there a way of factoring them into it? This is part of the information.
Councillor
So
Bain?
I think all of those things could be considered. Now, it came up at the cemetery meeting. Maybe it was the mayor that brought it up, and as Bob Morse said, it might last there for 2 nights.
The
Yeah.
parking meter in the cemetery?
Oh, yeah, because there's absolutely no control, there's no streetlights, there's no nothing, so, you know, I think
was it Cool Hand Luke or Cuckoo's Nest? Where the guy got time for cutting the heads off the parking meters. Cool Hand Luke. Okay, we have a motion before us, and the motion is ask staff to do a review and a recommendation on the potential for parking meters at the comfort stations and how we might utilize them.
It was a little less specific than that, I think.
Okay?
Yeah, it
It's
was.
kinda beyond that.
Didn't name the comfort station.
All right,
Yeah.
just use them in general. Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor? Motion's carried. Maintenant la prochaine.
Town of Mahone, the town of parking meters.
Pardon me?
Mahone Bay, the town of parking meters, I can't say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but our parking meters are optional. Bridgewater.
That's right.
I know.
Yeah.
I hate
Okay,
that.
the next piece of correspondence requiring actions from the MICA. It deals with their 17th annual gala dinner and auction, which traditionally takes place in October, November. And they're seeking support from the town of Mahone Bay.
I can't remember, was there any money put in for Micah when we did the grant money?
I don't believe so.
I don't
I don't
remember
think
there
so.
being any.
So
no.
they're actually late coming for this, so I refer to another year.
Okay.
Like,
Encourage them to apply.
Apply earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and give them the information.
yeah,
So
give
we
them the
would-
information, they were late. So I was so moved that a letter go back to Micah. They do great work, as we all know. I do use some of the islands, as Councilor Bain does, that they own, and but they have to adhere to our grant program.
We have a policy that
Yeah.
governs that.
We did the same thing for God, so I'm comfortable with it.
Yes.
I'll
Do
second
we
the
have a
motion.
seconder on the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried.
There'll probably be an 18th annual gala.
Well, I'm sure there will.
They're still hard workers, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was Chip Dickinson. Now we go down to correspondence items for information.
Motion to receive and file, your worship.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to staff reports.
Just before we leave that, do we have anybody that we would nominate in line?
For Ken Simpson?
And yeah, so, and would nominations be as a town, or could I send a name in just because I felt like it? Or do they come from groups? Anybody know that?
I thought they came from towns, Councillor Carver, but don't quote me on that.
Okay. I'm just guessing that if anybody felt passionate about it, they would bring a name
Yeah,
forward.
the way it says the nominations may be made by elected officials of the member municipality and or municipal staff who acknowledge. So I guess any elected official could, if you want to nominate
We
somebody
are a
of
member.
this municipality.
Yeah.
So you've got till September 13th to decide.
Yeah. Okay, staff reports, 6-1, report to council.
It's getting longer. It's 15 pages.
Yeah, no, you're really.
And we've just made it longer.
You're filling it up.
I had a question. I'm on the wrong one. 6-4.
Any questions with regards to this big long report?
No, it's so comprehensive.
It's excellent. Very briefly, and I'm sorry, I can't locate the number of it, but the tax sale notification. There's a note within the report that said that the second notification is delayed. Is that correct?
Yeah, it must be. I'm just trying to catch up with it. So that's under Luke's report. Here we go. There was some back and forth with the lawyer, so I think that's what that refers to.
And so we're at the stage where we're working with the owner, and that's not a public notification. That's a private notification.
That's the notification that actually says your property is going to tax sale on X date. At this point, yeah.
And so is that the only, we have one property that's currently on in this category?
Just one now. It was a very small number, but
Oh,
I'm not sure if
couple.
it's down to one yet. And the longer we take, the more. I mean, one of them we know will not come off the list. That there's no, they're not trying to remove it from the list. But yeah, maybe there's just one left now. I can check with Luke.
Hmm.
And then the other question that I had is just very small, the parking. There's a note that additional no parking signs are going to be put on Orchard Street.
Yes.
Is that in response to a concern, or is that what's the process for getting additional no parking signs?
Well, that is a recommendation from our bylaw enforcement officer.
Okay.
But if a member of the public has a place that they want us to review, I would say put them in touch with the office, put them in touch with me.
So who enforces these?
Bylaw.
The bylaw does?
Yeah, I'll enforce.
So they're the only one, the RCMP don't do anything with parking?
They don't do anything with no parking signs. They'll do fire hydrants sometimes. They'll do parking facing the wrong way when they feel like it.
Parking restrictions that flow from the Nova Scotia
Yeah,
Motor
yeah.
Vehicle Act, they will enforce. If it flows from town bylaws or town traffic directions, they won't.
So parking on a sidewalk would fall on that too,
Yeah, they would do that
Yeah.
if they choose to.
according to them.
Yeah.
They can do that.
I think Orchard Street becomes a problem with the biscuit eater when their parking lot's filled.
Yeah.
They just jam it up and you're literally covering driveways and everything.
And we,
And they're holding
Sometimes you
more
go
and more
there, you
events
have to
in their
look around
parking
the corner,
lot, which
yeah.
means they don't
I'll
have
park up on
parking.
the next street. So
but there was a letter to council, if you recall, I think it was back in the late fall, where a gentleman received a parking ticket on Orchard Street, and he expressed his concern that the signage wasn't clear. And lo and behold, when you go out and look at the signage, you know, there is a reasonable doubt as to whether or not you should park there.
Mm-hmm.
And that signage was intended, I believe, and could be wrong, but I believe it was to try and correct that difficulty on Orchard Street. Right? So,
Yeah. And the reason it is no parking in the first place, to John's point, is when there is something going on there, it can get awfully narrow.
Very narrow.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it is a
for
two-way
sure.
street, even though you wouldn't think so.
very
Take your
difficult
time.
to get right off the street when you're parking opposite there too. You know. Anyway,
question, Councillor O'Neill?
I'm just picking up on Councillor Now's question about enforcement. And it's a bit peripheral, but what would be once a ticket is issued? What is our ability? Do we have a legal ability to collect, or is it sort of?
Yeah, that's been kind of subject to change over the. We're supposed to be in a position to utilize the summary offense ticket system. I don't think that is always necessary. There's two levels. Mo, do you want to jump in on this? Don't feel like you have to.
Yeah, we can follow up with a summary offense. We have those all set up. Our bylaw enforcement officer is ready to go with all of those. But for the most part, people just come in and pay their ticket, and it doesn't get down to that. Our bylaw enforcement officer is really good about talking to people when he sees them, and his preference is to say, you know, please don't park on the sidewalk in front of the dog shop, right? We need this to be clear. So he's a lot about education. So for the most part, people are just coming in and paying them, which is great. But we do have the ability to work through the summary offense ticket system. So he's up with that.
And with visitors, sometimes it's,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to affect education, which is really the point of our enforcement. So whether you're chasing after a visitor for that small sum of money or you let it go.
And a big part of the education is people saying, look, I get a ticket every time I park on the sidewalk in front of the convenience store. Look, they're really watching that now.
Yeah.
That's a big part of education.
It's one of those doctor, it hurts when I do this kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's, we're hoping that makes a difference, is that when people see that he's out there and he's really watching and he's paying attention, then hopefully that makes a big difference in the education piece. Because the purpose is to have safe streets.
Are his hours and days going to increase during the summer months at all, or is he contracted to
Just
provide the
recently had a
same?
conversation about having some spare hours to go around in the summer.
When we originally did the budget last year to bring a bylaw enforcement officer in, we did plan on extra hours for festivals and summer and that sort of thing. So the other thing is, I think he's flexible in his hours so that people don't get to know, we know these days that
Just
he's
don't park there on Tuesday.
Yeah.
right. So he's flexible with that, and he's been ducking into town the nights that there are softball games on, getting a sense of what goes on over there. You were just talking with that counselor now. He's sort of watching on Saturdays and stuff like that as well, because he sees that the town is getting busier. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the report?
If we're done with the questions on the report, I wanted to show people that logo, which you may have noticed while you were scrolling through.
Mm-hmm.
And unless anyone has any objections, we're going to go ahead and put that on things now. So I just wanted to make sure people had seen it. The staff were very proud of it. They made it themselves. And they wanted me to show people. So
I liked it when I saw it, but I wondered about the Riverport Association with the turbines. I mean, I think of the Mahone Bay Association with the turbines, but
well, I think that Riverport wants to be associated with efforts towards green energy. They may not always, because of their status, be able to get the kind of funds that they would need to participate, but they'd like to be seen as a partner of Mahone Bay and all the things that we do. So I wouldn't begrudge them that. Anyway.
yeah.
They just don't have the means to do it. But I think it's great to be able to celebrate the relationship, and we're moving towards, as it notes down in the bottom part of this report, moving towards a truck purchase, and so we'll have 2 shared trucks at that point.
So this is our electrical utilities logo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
For the new truck.
We can't put it. We're renting a truck for now, though. We can't put it on the truck that we're renting. But
does it need a motion or anything to approve it?
I don't think so. But I just, unless somebody's objecting, we're going to go ahead with it. So I just wanted everybody to see it.
Of course, there will be an 8x10 glossy of Dylan's face on the middle of it, but
No, I thought it would be better to bring it to everyone's attention before you saw it on a vehicle driving by.
I like
and
it.
Wondered where it came from.
I like
It's
it.
cheerful.
Yep. New technology, forward looking. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Okay. Set 2 for that one. Let's go to. I guess I'm gonna zip up here to my agenda. Supportive workplace policy. CAO.
This one was recommended to council at our last meeting, but as a policy, it's waiting for a motion to adopt at this meeting. If there's any questions, people have had a month. We haven't heard anything, but obviously I'll take questions now, or somebody can jump in and
I
make that
also
motion.
move the council adopt the supportive workplace committee policy.
Second that, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
There you go. The workplace now supports it. Okay.
Just like that.
Next, we have the prize policy.
Also deferred. This one did have some feedback and did have some changes. I think the change is pretty much one change. Mo, you can jump in and let me know if there were other changes. The primary change was the removal of references to immediate family. The policy now reads that staff and council members would be ineligible to win a prize from the town.
Also move adoption of that policy.
We have a seconder? No one's going to say
I didn't talk to anybody.
Okay. All right. No, I don't. I can't.
You can second a motion. You can second a motion and not support it. I guess.
I will second the motion.
Then
There
we
you
can
go.
discuss
I'm
it.
very curious.
All right.
And I'll just say one thing for in discussion. I'm going to repeat again the request to give staff direction. I understand that some members of council feel this isn't a really important subject, but in the absence of direction, it is hard for staff to oversee these things. So just the direction, it is appreciated, whether it seems like common sense or not. it didn't take us a long time to draft the policy, but we would like direction as to future competition. So if this doesn't pass, our direction will be that staff and council members are eligible, which is fine, but we're not going to make that determination on our own.
Well, I'll just make a comment. I don't plan on ever entering the contest. It's a town run, and my wife and my children, I don't think, do it either. So that's why I just think I think whoever complained to you has a lot of time in their hands.
Well, we have had applications from council members and staff before, so it's not unheard
Not
of.
for me.
For me.
We've had applications from council members?
And I would.
I mean, I guess I should say entries. They're not
Entries,
applications.
yeah.
These are
Okay.
often this is a survey. You don't have to be entered for a draw to participate in the survey. So
And I'm supporting this because we may have other surveys or other prize things that happen for that reason, and because it's harmless. I mean, but it does provide some clarity. There's no harm in having it on our books. But and the advantage is it provides some clarity for staff.
Okay.
So that's,
Councillor O'Neill?
I don't know. I suppose when I, spent 5 minutes thinking about this, I thought that I do participate in the surveys. I think it's valuable that, we're a small town and numbers matter when you're trying to get people to complete a survey. I think that if, a topic affects you, then you ought to feel comfortable, regardless of your position with the town, to participate in that survey. I feel that my opinion and my family's opinions and staff opinions are important. So I wouldn't want to dissuade anyone from not participating in these activities. I suppose, I don't think that you necessarily have to exclude them from, these are small prizes. These are not, cars and homes. They're, I know.
They're not.
Not yet, maybe.
yeah,
So
who
I was
knows?
thinking,
Hold on to that
policy, I wouldn't want to do anything that would dissuade even one person from entering, for example, the survey, because I think that everyone's feedback is important.
Councillor Garber.
any of us could enter the survey or make comments on the survey, but not be eligible for a prize.
I actually think
Is
that
it-
in terms of staff,
yeah.
this type of clarity would encourage people to feel like they were not doing something inappropriate
Mm-hmm.
by participating in the full knowledge that they were
Yeah,
eligible to win a
yeah.
prize.
And I think it provides some transparency to the citizens of the town, right? And I would like to think that everyone around this table would participate in a survey, not because they might win a $100 Visa card, but because they have an opinion that they would like to have heard in the conduct of the town on a particular issue. It's not for our benefit, I don't think, that I would see this approved. It is for the benefit of the citizens to have a certain degree of comfort that their council is above reproach on these kinds of issues.
And I see value or significance in the fact that I believe staff requested clarity.
The direction.
So I think it's fair to support them.
Call for the question? All in favor? Against? 3-3. Motion's defeated. Okay, let's move on.
So, just so everyone knows, council and staff are eligible. You use your own judgment under the conflict of interest rules whether you will apply.
As the judge in Cape Breton said, the arse is out of her now.
Yes.
I'm astonished.
Okay, let's go to the donations policy from June 11th.
So the donations policy, we have two items on here, and if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna go to the attachment community asset donation program first.
Yes?
So the donation policy hasn't changed since it was recommended to council at our last meeting, like all policies that came forward at the last meeting with the recommendation to be adopted at this meeting. The one distinction to that, the highlighted part here, was with regards to staff providing an example of the community asset donation program proposed asset list. So essentially, while the policy governs the ability to make a donation of anything to the town, it also provides for a sort of fast track for
Mhm.
people who would like to make a donation for a specific community asset, say a bench or something of that nature, and receive a donation for it without going through the process of designing or coming up with anything. They just say, we want to donate a bench. Derek says, that's exactly this much. Here are the 10 locations we have in line for benches. So the list that we developed for council is this one, and these are the items that we have currently envisioned could be available for donation under this program. So benches of the sort that we currently use, which is a wood or composite material with a steel frame, concrete mounted, and paint optional. Plaque would be affixed to the donation. You can either donate in someone's memory, or you could donate and just have your own name and recognition. Picnic tables, we're looking at a recommendation for an accessible picnic table design. We don't currently have any. This allows for somebody in a wheelchair to actually pull up to the table and use it the way other people would be able to. Pretty simple, just a little bit of extra wood. So in terms of accessibility improvements, it's one of the least costly ones. We thought we might encourage people to donate.
Now, I noticed that particular example
Yeah.
is sitting in a grassy field. Do
We usually don't anticipate doing that.
Okay.
It's
All
case
right.
by case, so that's why it says concrete pad depending on location. Sometimes it's preferable to have a movable piece of table or bench in a recreational setting, and then other places, like especially on the waterfront, it wouldn't be. The lifespan of something that's made of wood will be prolonged by putting it on concrete. But that being said, some places the installation of concrete pads isn't feasible, so it'll be pretty much case by case on Derek's judgment.
And the access for someone who is in a chair would be considered.
Yeah, and there's
In
very
the-
little point if you can't get a barrier-free access
Exactly.
to the site in
Yeah.
putting a concrete pad in the middle
That's
of the
right.
field. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. But
Long
no,
as
those are
that's
all
part of it.
important factors to be
Yeah.
considered with the picnic tables. We also have trees. We're not prescribing specific varieties. We are developing a list of locations in consultation with the trees group, so that there are some locations on public property where some types of plantings would be appropriate. Hopefully then we can identify them and encourage people to adopt these locations by donating a tree, and the tree will have a plaque next to it, not on it, indicating the donation. Mo has already figured out a great way to do the plaques, so that could be used for us as well as the 100 Trees campaign.
So you said that you wouldn't specify types of trees, but we know that there are some types of trees that we definitely don't want.
There would be location-specific guidelines. So if a location is on street, only some types of trees would be acceptable. But if somebody came to us and they say, I really want to donate a cherry tree, we would look at what location would be
Yeah,
appropriate for
But
that.
I know I'm thinking of the Norway maple issue and things like Manitoba
It might be
maples
something
or
we
any
just
other
outright
weed
ban,
trees
yeah,
and things that
yeah.
we just don't want.
Yeah, I think we would probably keep the opportunity to evaluate rather than saying, here are the trees we won't accept. But we do need that guideline for Derek so that he has a sense of that.
Yeah.
And I know he heard some of that on
This
the.
is right on
the
the varieties in consultation with Public Works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we want to make sure Derek's well informed as to some of the varieties to avoid.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bike rides.
Bike racks, that's a picture of one that we actually have. Sizes are variable. That's the smallest kind. You can certainly do about 3 times that size. The concrete mounted plaque would go on the base there. Derek confirmed that we could do that. We've got some recycling type. So this is the 3-stream. It's a very expensive donation, this one, but potentially maybe a corporate donor might want to do one of these.
Is that made by Abco?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're quite
They got some
pricey,
nice
but
stuff.
they're very nice.
We can get some of that money from Region 6 too. We want to purchase some.
Underwrite some, yeah. Get a donation and then have the rest of it subsidized or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, because they have a program for.
So these we don't have any of, and we've had some discussions at council. But this is one they have in Lunenburg, where I took this picture. And I have to say, I'm pretty enamored with the opportunity to put the dispenser and the collector receptacle in the same spot.
Yeah.
My
Each end of the trail, that
dog
sort of thing.
personally tested this one. It was quite good.
Okay.
So
if
we're
we did-
suggesting there would be some locations where these would be appropriate, such as the entrance to the park and that kind of
Yep.
thing.
And the path, the
Trail
trail.
intersection, big if you
But
could.
have we dealt with the issue about plastic bags, the plastic baggies?
Yeah, well, in this case, the thought would be that you're being encouraged to. There is a receptacle right here. At the next crossing, there will be another receptacle. So there is then a sense of, like we've talked about, if there's nowhere to put the bag, is it more dangerous to give someone a bag? So it takes that into account. As far as the type of bag,
The single-use plastic,
yeah, if we're using biodegradable bags, they still take a lot longer to biodegrade than the waste itself. So the other option is we don't have the dispensers, we just have the receptacles, because whether we give people bags or not, a lot of people do use plastic and biodegradable bags. So that's a thought. If council's worried about propagating even the biodegradable bags, because, yeah, they're not perfect, we could go with an option where there's just a can receptacle.
I was driving down Main Street yesterday, and there were 3 people. They looked like tourists. They were senior citizens, and I didn't recognize them from town. And they were standing around a huge pile of dog dirt on the sidewalk. And I would be more concerned about the opinion they take away from the town of Mahone Bay
absolutely.
because of that
Yeah.
than somebody had picked it up in a plastic bag. And I'm
Yeah.
sure if you wait 6 months, they'll have a biodegradable
Yeah.
dog poop bag.
That dog walker worse was never picked up after his dog. I mean, anybody that leave it lay in the sidewalk is not
Right in
gonna
the
pick
middle
it
of
up.
the sidewalk.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
And it's really not
if we
gonna matter
don't
whether.
look at- I have a question about the text of the.
There's one more thing I just
Oh,
wanted to
okay.
show you guys. So this is the last one. This
yeah.
is a product that we've done a little bit of research on, and I think because of the interest in cigarette butts as a emerging, difficult to deal with piece of garbage, and the likelihood that people will actually put them in the bins, and of course the bins are flammable. There's other issues. These are only $100, and it comes with the service that includes sending away the it pops out the bottom,
yeah, that's right.
and you send it away for recycling. So it would be
The filters.
quite an affordable option to put some of these around town. And so we thought maybe as a donation basis, if somebody would like to potentially say, I'd like one of these out front of my business, for example, that they could pay $100, or maybe it'll end up being $125 installed or whatever.
We could walk down the street and say, look, there's Richard Now's butt recycler.
And they are pole mounted, so they're relatively
Very
near the
good.
street for the downtown.
That's a good idea.
I love the program. If 25 people want to sponsor cigarette butt recycler, is that how the program works? It's generated by X number of people who want to do this, and we will install an unlimited number of these things? Or
I think up to the point where we feel that all of the locations that we thought were reasonable have been
That would have.
filled.
so is that specified? Like when somebody when someone sponsors one of these items, do they sponsor an item in a particular spot, or do they sponsor an item, or has that been?
I mean, under the community as a donation program, you can say, I'm thinking of this spot, and then Derek can say, well, that's actually a spot that's on our list, so yes, or that's not an acceptable spot, so no. But the thought really with this is that individual campaigns could then be mounted around specific things. So we've already had some conversation about how the cemetery might run a donation campaign if there were certain assets that they wanted for within the cemetery. Age Friendly briefly talked about a bench campaign, so they would identify where some benches could be to support seniors, and then they could go out and actually fundraise for those. Similarly, I think if we wanted to do a butt out kind of campaign, we would encourage people. So we would say, we've found these 16 locations, and we would like to see people sponsor these locations. So it kind of depends on the specific campaign. The policy doesn't prescribe that aspect. And I think we'll find more creative ways to use it if it's in place.
Okay.
So Penny, you had a question on the policy.
On the text, yes, item 6.2.
Six two.
6.2, the non-qualifying donations.
Yeah.
And second bullet, donations that are given to the town intended as a flow-through to a specified recipient who does not have charitable organization status. And the reason I'm asking about that exclusion is because for many years, the Mahone Bay Center used that process to channel donations to the center before it achieved its charitable status.
Yeah, several years ago, the CRA cracked down on that quite significantly.
Oh, did it?
So most municipalities have now had to bend their practice in that regard.
I see.
What you can still do, and we still have on the books, is the what is it called, the athletic and cultural fund.
Yes, yeah.
And
Well,
in
that's
that,
where
the
that's where they
distinction
went.
there is that you are making a donation to the athletic and cultural fund and giving up any opportunity to determine the allocation of that.
Yes, okay.
And by giving that up, you're donating to the town,
Yes.
which is able to issue a charitable receipt. So you can't specify the flow through. Now,
get
we
it.
can flow it through, but it's at council's discretion.
Yes, I
Yeah.
get it. And that's, in
So
fact,
that distinction still exists.
okay,
yeah.
and that is in fact the procedure that the Mahone Bay Center
Okay.
used. Yeah.
So it's just the
okay.
council would have had to have in mind that the
yeah,
center was the,
Got
yeah.
it. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Bain.
In Lunenburg, at the curling club, that's the system they use. Lunenburg has this athletic thing, and then the curling club in turn applies to the council.
Yeah.
And it gets approved, but it doesn't mean it has to be approved.
And somehow MODL made a similar arrangement with Lunenburg Yacht Club
Mhm.
when they were doing a big fundraising campaign. And the money went through to them, but
Yeah.
receipts got
Yeah,
issued.
it's pretty common practice.
So I'd
Well, that
feel
clarifies.
more comfortable with this policy
Yeah.
going out and actually promoting the athletic and cultural fund. But
Mhm.
we would be careful to indicate the distinction
Yeah.
around flow through. And I don't think we've promoted the athletic and cultural fund in a while. I know it has a balance, but I believe it's just been sitting for a little
Yeah.
while.
A few $1,000.
So this has no bearing on like when the fire department does our door-to-door canvas, and then
That's a different situation.
the money, we turn the monies into the town to get the receipts for the people, so like that.
Yeah, so the fire department, because you don't legally exist as independent from the town,
Hmm.
the town is a charity
Yes.
when conducting that. So the town is still able to.
The town is still,
Yeah.
that's coming up, so
And
that's
if
why
you,
I
if you
asked.
did exist independently of the town, you would be able to qualify as a charity anyway.
Okay. We have a recommended motion.
Yes, just to adopt the policy as presented.
Also move.
Okay, moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconder by Councillor Now. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Well, this is good. The rest of the meeting wasn't so full, so we gave you all the staff reports on this
There
one.
you go. Speed sign deployment
Chip
plan.
it up.
You're still on the hook, Mr.
Yeah. So this is follow up to council's previous direction to staff to develop a speed sign deployment plan. We had some discussions around two rationale for this. Obviously, public education and traffic calming was the original primary motivation for the use of the speed signs. However, we have come to find them very handy for speed and traffic counting. As traffic authority, I feel that a counts program is a very useful thing to maintain. You know, Bridgewater does one. We had just kind of gotten one going in Shelburne when I left. It does give us accurate data and an opportunity to calibrate, because what we just saw from the Blue Route folks was that we actually, in using the speed signs for counting, are arguably getting a mistaken confidence from the way people behave when they're in front of the sign versus the way that people behave otherwise. So part of what this builds in is calibration counts, where we would use tube counters on off periods to, like, basically where the speed sign was the prior year, in that same quarter the following year you would get to use a tube counter, and you would be able to compare how the exact same period was according to an invisible counter, well, relatively invisible, or one that is very prominent. And I think we will see, as they did when they did the count on Clearway, some distinctions there, and that may help inform our traffic planning. So in the end, we've come up with a speed sign deployment plan that does build into it the use of two tube counters. And otherwise, we've recommended it, and it's attached. I wasn't going to go into it, but if anyone has questions, we can.
I will move the council approve the speed sign development plan as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the speed sign deployment plan be accepted as presented,
It's very comprehensive.
isn't
It
it?
goes ahead for many
I'm
years,
curious,
to
if I could
2024.
ask one question.
And Mo deserves a lot of credit for actually putting that document together.
It says staff notes Fairmont at Main and Main Street intersection. What is that?
It's just for placement.
Okay.
Oh, on Main. So
Okay.
it would be on, is that gonna be on Main?
We have some little notes about where, yeah, there's, that one is a counter. And one of
Oh,
the issues
okay.
with the counter is you have to have it anchored on both sides of the road.
Ah.
So we spent a fair amount of time driving around and parked on sides of interesting places where there is sidewalk on both sides of the road and that sort of thing. So
It's funny because the speed signs have one set of concerns. They have to be on a pole facing a certain way, and then the tube counters have a different set of concerns.
that conversation may have come up in the truck, maybe come up once or twice.
Okay.
Gosh, you have fun in your job.
It's always different. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded, all in favor. Motion's carried. Let's go to the next item. Centennial update.
So the Centennial updates, I don't normally attach all the previous reports to every report, but I have been doing it with the Centennial just because it's difficult to recap. So without recapping, if you want to, you've got lots of pages, but the actual current update is not that substantial, but we certainly wanted council to be aware of what had happened since April 25th. Some good progress on a number of files. Couple of setbacks, but I think generally we're moving ahead with most of these. So if anyone has any questions, we'll take them. But then I did have a couple of specific, I don't know, they're not even recommendations, but I guess kind of just an opportunities to highlight for council in terms of your input. But I can take questions first if there are any.
I was fortunate enough to have a meeting today with the author of the Centennial book. And he raised the question about whether or not there was any kind of a marketing plan developed yet for the book. Because that is our responsibility, not his. I guess if we have something in mind, we might share that information with the gentleman.
Yeah, we're certainly working on marketing and promotion stuff. I'd say right now staff primarily are concerned with the layout and final production questions. There's a lot more back-end work anticipated than I think that the author originally imagined, so I'm trying to keep that in mind.
I don't know how he's going to do it in 90 pages.
So with all that in mind, we do have some thoughts as to
Okay.
how we'll sell it and how we can promote it. But some of that will be dependent on the product that actually comes out at the end of this. And we have a certain vision for that, and we're really hoping that by the time the August 15th deadline that we've set with the author rolls around, that we are able to produce the book as intended. But there will be a moment where we have to take stock of what the final product's going to be.
Yeah.
And we don't want to market something now that isn't what we're going to produce in the fall. But it is coming, and we are certainly giving a lot of thought to marketing.
He is adamant that he will be able to deliver for the 15th of August,
Yes.
which is his target
Yeah.
delivery date.
And we're looking forward to it.
Yep. Lots of photographs and lots of narrative. Councillor O'Neill?
My question was about the bandstand repainting,
Mm.
and I wondered if there was, and I didn't see it in the report. It may be there. Are there any parameters that would specify that the Chamber of Commerce would be a partner in choosing the colors? I'm aware that they're, the branding, the branding efforts and the color schemes that they're doing with the tourist office and things. They do have, I would say, strong opinions about color scheme, and I wondered if that had been considered.
I don't think there's any pre-existing commitments, but that being said, at council's direction, we can certainly take that approach.
I would not support the color scheme that they've chosen for their branding for the bandstand.
Orange and green.
I wondered if the
I
Economic
agree.
Development Committee would be the appropriate an appropriate partner in choosing the colors. I didn't see anything in there that said necessarily how the colors were going to be chosen.
No, and in fact, I'm mostly saying that, obviously Public Works generally works under the assumption they're going to do it the same way as it was. So we really hadn't given thought to the colors. We've had some delays that have given us pause to kind of get thinking, and one of the things we were thinking was, well, really is no additional cost to change the color. So if council wanted to, relatively tight time frame, we need to figure it out during the month of July, we can try to embark on either a process with the chamber, a process with the public. Council could just do a show of hands, what color you like best. But we wanted to put it out there before Derek just went back to the original colors automatically. So
Well,
should have done it sooner, and that I do apologize for not bringing it up sooner.
economic development is, there are members of the chamber on that committee, and I wondered if the chair would agree that that was a good.
Well, I could agree with that. The only thing is, I see that it adds an additional step to the whole thing based on when we have our meetings. And if there's another vehicle, I agree with Councilor Neal on having some way of choosing colors, but not to put it into something that could delay the decision-making process. We're a committee of the town of Mahone Bay, so we have a meeting and then it goes to a council meeting, and then all of a sudden the month's gone.
Deputy Mayor, you have a,
It's been that color for many, many years. Nobody has said a word, just go with the flow. I agree. I don't want to see it orange. That's one thing I don't want.
And I cannot see a rationale that the Chamber of Commerce or the Economic Development Committee has any more say in the color than any group of townspeople who have a vested interest in the beauty of the bandstand.
Yeah.
do I hear a motion here with respect to paint color?
I was so moved that the paint color stay the same as it was painted before.
I'll
Do we
second
have-
that.
Seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? Motion's carried.
All right. So the other thing we were asking for, again, it's not absolute, but it would be quite helpful if council wants to proceed in the manner recommended with respect to infrastructure decoration proposals. So these are small proposals for the decoration of. We've talked about things ranging from the lift stations, electrical boxes, the barriers that separate the bandstand from the BMO and Oh My God parking area. Just small touches of color. If somebody from council felt like joining us in reviewing submissions on that, because I don't think it needs to come to council for motions, but as with Joe playing the important role of being on the panel for the book project, and he's attended a number of meetings with the author, maybe somebody else from council wants to put themselves forward to do that for this.
I love the fire hydrants in Liverpool painted to look like dogs. I think it was pretty good.
And that's the kind of small touches that we are talking about.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about hydrants. I don't think that's on the list right now, but who knows? Maybe if we do a couple of those barriers, somebody says, those look good, why don't you do the hydrants? I think the hydrants we bring back to
Northern
council.
Ireland, they're all Union Jacks.
Pardon me?
The hydrants in Northern Ireland are primarily Union Jacks.
And a lot of places now are painting their hydrants different colors according to the water flow with each hydrant.
Don't do that. All of ours are going to be at the lowest level.
No, but I'm just saying, if they have various levels,
Don't write
then
that.
you,
It's recorded.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, no,
a
absolutely.
fire department knows.
We looked at those,
Water flow?
their national ratings, and we looked at that in Shelburne, and we realized that we would be doing only
Yeah.
one color, so we didn't go
Councillor
with it.
Carver?
Although I was the person who carried this message to the initial meeting for the centennial planning on behalf of somebody, a townsperson who was out of country at the time, I put the idea forward on her behalf. I have to confess that I really am not enthusiastic about this project at all, because I fear that it will end up with sort of just a mixture, a hodgepodge of I'm not enthusiastic about it.
Of painting any of these kinds of
Yeah,
things?
I'm not. Unless it was to paint that box in beside the hedge over there by the bandstand.
Well, that's
Like
one
a
of the
green,
main.
a green that blends
One of the
into
main
the
ones
hedge.
on the list. Well, Penny, it
I
sounds
don't-
like you might want to be on a panel hearing about
No,
submissions.
no, I don't.
Councillor O'Neill?
Where items are being painted to celebrate the centennial and also for purposes of attracting tourists and having people speak about us the way they do about the hydrants and Liverpool and other places. Again, I would just say that that is very much a topic that would be interesting to the Economic Development Committee. And I feel that would be well placed that activity of reviewing infrastructure decoration proposals would be, they would do a very good job of reviewing that. If they have a vested interest, they also have a very vested interest in the color schemes and the decorations being consistent, and they have a very strong line of sight into the business community. So I would propose that.
So replacing this panel with a referral to the Economic Development Committee?
Yes.
I think?
Would the idea would that be that they would be somewhat juried
Yes.
ideas, proposals?
Not
Well,
necessarily orange and green.
Not necessarily orange.
And then Penny, the jury is basically what we're trying to construct here. So
Mhm.
using
Yeah.
the committee as a jury, that's an option.
And-
The
and-
only question I'll have for them is, if we're going to do this, do you think that they will be willing to meet at least sometimes during July and August? Like, if they were going to not meet at all between July and August, we might need to get them together at some point if we start to get proposals.
I am on the committee, and I
meeting will
can't
be-
speak for them. We do have a meeting on the 3rd of July, and that would be possible to
That's-
put it to them.
I'll support that idea of, we'll vent it with the committee and see.
And the notion, I think, that whatever painting or whatever decorating they might choose to do, that it not be an overly complicated thing to replicate, because as the paint fades, which it will do, right, you want to be able to touch it up. So if it's a
Well, and
I know
I
this-
think the approach we should take as per the donations policy is that these things do not stand forever, and that we actively seek to replace them as they become degraded. So they won't always have to be the exact same thing.
but things like the wooden panel down in the marina,
You can completely start over again
that's
and
made
repaint a
with
different design.
weatherproof
Yeah.
wood, it's going to last a hell of a lot longer than any paint scheme is,
Mm.
right? It'll be long
Yeah, the
faded,
paint
and the
will be
wood
off.
won't have to be replaced.
Yeah,
Councillor
I'll,
Ray?
I'll suggest that it can go to the Economic Development Committee,
Okay,
but it will be, it may come back. We're going to have to have a pretty open discussion with them and see what kind of
they'll
responsibility.
make the recommendations
That's right.
back to,
Yeah.
And you can get that turned around for the next meeting of council because you're
We'll
meeting
do
so
that
soon.
for the
Okay.
third day that I need to-
is that a motion, Councillor Bain?
Yes.
Refer to the economic development?
Yeah.
Seconded? All in favor? Motion's carried.
Great, thank you. And then I was hoping we could just get a report to, or a motion to accept this report for information.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Next, we have climate mitigation update.
Couple
We'll
of
start with the Alberta
recommendations.
tar sands and we'll go from there.
Well, luckily we only have Mahone Bay to worry about, but it's still a pretty significant challenge, and this report is pointing to some opportunities to get some outside assistance with the things that council has approved in the strategic plan and the budget. I think these opportunities are no-brainers from my perspective. We get to join with other units that are trying to do the same things that we're trying to do and tap into FCM and federal money. But if anyone has questions, certainly if other people are not as enthusiastic as I am about this opportunity, I'd love to hear it and speak to that.
When MP Jordan was in yesterday, she was over in Chester, Municipality District of Chester, New Ross, doing some announcements. And she talked about a new funding program that would assist communities dealing with the impacts of climate change and tidal flooding waters in particular. A new bag of money. There could be an opportunity there. So
Mm.
I'm sure there'll be something
Yeah,
coming
we'll definitely
from
keep
that.
an eye on it. Well, so I should specify that this is dealing with the mitigation side of climate change. So this is about Mahone Bay's emissions and reducing the emissions of Mahone Bay.
Okay.
But then the adaptation side is, of course, a lot
Yeah.
of our budget as well, yeah.
So there could be something there.
So I'll also note, since you mentioned the municipality of Chester, that the FCM Transition 2050 initiative with the Clean Foundation has 7 participants in Nova Scotia that are confirmed. Municipality of Chester is one of them. We're being given the opportunity to be added to that list. That list was actually made before council approved taking this action and before council set this budget. So their willingness to allow us to get into it, if we're willing to write a support letter, is quite an opportunity in that sense, because they actually closed this program back in February.
Who are the other municipalities?
Town of Windsor, there's a whole list. It's on this link here. I can follow it for you.
We do have a recommended motion to
I-
the FCM piece.
Well, I would move that the town of Mahone Bay join the FCM's Partners for Climate Protection Program. And we'll do these separately, I suppose.
I think we can we do them together?
We can do them together if you want.
Yeah.
And that the town of Mahone Bay support the Clean Foundation FCM Transition 2050 initiative, and staff be directed to send a support letter to this effect to the Clean Foundation.
I'll second that.
And then
Okay.
this is the list, and I'm afraid I can't make that bigger, unfortunately.
Thank you.
So we got Wolfville, Cumberland County, County of Inverness, Municipality of Chester, Municipality of District of West Hants, and the Town of Windsor. So we would be the smallest unit.
Okay.
So in reducing the carbon footprint, are we talking about town facilities or everything? in
We're
the town?
talking about
Everybody.
community, the
Everybody.
town's
Community.
included, but
The whole town.
community.
The
Okay.
community. All in favor? Motion's carried. Good one.
Right, well, I'll get that letter sent off.
All right. Tax exemption for nonprofit organizations bylaw.
Came all the way back around to that.
You
Yeah,
did
there
indeed.
it is.
Yeah.
Back again.
So obviously this is the recommendation for second reading. We had a hearing. We received no submissions of any sort, which I think in this case could probably be taken to say there's no opposition to this recommendation. And the recommendation, that we're behind. So the recommendation in this case is that council adopt the, we need a new recommendation. This one would be the council give second reading to the nonprofit organizations bylaw.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Second reading. All in favor? Motion's carried. All right.
Right.
Down to item 7. Council appointments for the Governance Committee for the Shared Building Services Group, Committee. This group has not met for some time. It hadn't met since before we did our last round of committee appointments. And this is the common service group that's being created to deal with building inspection services and fire services, that will see us create one entity that will deal with Chester and Mahone Bay and Lunenburg and
MOD.
MODL.
Lunenburg, town of Lunenburg too?
And I think Deputy Mayor was on it before, as was Councillor Bain.
Well, I was on a governance committee, but nothing to do in this context. It's back when we discussed amalgamation.
And do we have nominees to go to that governance committee now?
Do we have nominees? Well, we've talked about how there's some small overlap with MJSB, but I wouldn't assume that it's necessarily the same two people.
No?
I think in that case it was Joe and Richard, but just because you go to the MODL council chambers for a meeting about shared services, it's a different shared services with different partners. It doesn't have to be the same two people.
But we also, this governance committee that we're talking, the building inspectors, all our IT is coming from Joint Service Board.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think it's they're buying common software. The idea is that it won't matter where you get the building inspector or the fire inspector from. They're all going to sing from the same song sheet. And they're all working for the same organization. They're all using the same software, the same forms, right? All these common user.
We hear a
bits
lot
and
about
pieces.
perceived
All information will be the
inconsistency
same.
from developers. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what
I
we
mean,
have.
I've talked to builders who will say, "Geez, I hope we don't get so and so as an inspector at this stage because they're really nuts about insulation, right? Or how the roof is built, or those kinds of." There's enough flexibility in the building codes that individual inspectors will decide to focus on a particular area. And it's difficult for the builders with those inconsistencies to do their work effectively.
Well, your worship, I will put my name forward to stay on the governance
Okay?
committee.
Second.
Councillor Bain, are you
Well, what did Councillor O'Neill just?
Oh, yeah, no, I think
Are you going on that committee?
no, I didn't. I'm supporting.
That's why you threw your hand up.
Supporting.
Careful.
Enthusiastically supporting.
My next move was to second the two people.
I think if we had another volunteer, we could have a motion for both of those two.
I'll go on the committee, but I'll be a bit like Errol. I have a little trouble understanding some of the software talk. I mean, I was at the same meeting that.
Yeah.
Yes, you
Yeah,
were.
that's right.
You were.
Probably only
I
have one
would
more
want
this
it.
year.
Yeah, the way the program.
I'm glad to hear
is-
you both make that
It
offer.
sounds
because-
extremely simple, but when you hear the planner doing the discussion.
Yeah, I'm
with all
sure.
the software, but I'm sure it will come together and it's a worthwhile.
I'm also enthusiastic about this.
I would entertain a motion to appoint the deputy mayor and Councillor Bain to the, that governance, group.
I so move.
I'll second this.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Carver, did you have a comment?
It was that, I was, because it seemed like Deputy Mayor Noss's offer was gonna be treated like a motion. Okay, got it.
Okay.
We're back to square
Moved and
one.
seconded. All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to, I lost my agenda. My mouse
Got a
isn't
notice
working.
of motion.
Yeah,
Your
notice of
Worship, I would
motion.
like to move that Town of Mahone Bay Council support the Mahone Bay Music Association and the 2019 Summer Concert Series.
I'll second.
Okay,
Just in discussion, I wanted to.
moved and
brief
seconded,
update.
yes, please.
So we're in regular contact, obviously, with these guys, and I think they would appreciate the motion for sure. I construe the motion to mean that, particularly right now, we're going to try to support them with anything that would allow them to do the July concerts in the absence of potentially the bandstand. So we're trying to work with the contractor and specify, how can we still have some activity on this property. What I don't construe the motion to include is financial donation. I am going to come back when we find out about our legacy fund status, and we'll talk about that aspect.
Yeah.
Yes, my understanding is that it wouldn't be a
No,
financial
no
donation.
financial,
No.
just
Not
supporting
as-
the program.
Just support them.
Yeah, it would be nice in the whole concept of the thing if it could be done a little bit like the Legion dinners or the Legion breakfast where we do have sponsors. I would
Individual
say-
citizens or
Yeah,
businesses.
just-
Yeah, if
Sponsor
we
them.
can somehow encourage that. I mean, I'm going to support the motion.
Well, I believe that they've. I hope it's not out of turn to say. I believe they raised about $4,000.
They've already got quite a bit of money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they announced that publicly
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
their last meeting.
And they're anticipating $1,500 to $2,000 from the town once we know what our legacy funding situation is going to be.
Okay, let's ready for the.
Are we ready for the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. I think that's going to be a great addition to the town.
Yeah, nice.
I really do. Glad to see that go. Okay. Heritage Advisory, we're down to committee reports. Heritage Advisory Committee.
So in Councillor Feeney's absence, I will take any questions about the minutes, if anybody so wishes. But the main thing is that we have a motion a recommendation to register the property at 16 Orchard Street as a heritage municipally registered property.
Did you just make that motion?
I haven't yet made it, but I'm just about to do it. And I'm
Just trying
alluding,
to
I'm
get
alluding
it up
to
on the
it.
screen, but it's there now.
I know, I'm reading it off here. So that the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I'm moving this now, that council register the property located at 16 Orchard Street as a municipal heritage property.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
You seconded, okay, good. Do you have write-ups on all of the heritage properties like this one?
Yep.
That's a really amazing profile of the significance of that
Yeah.
house.
Yep.
Is that Nielsen, Ms. Nielsen who does that, or
No, Deborah and I did it together.
really?
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
I've written the statements of significance for most of the registered properties
Well, there you
in
go.
Canada, in the
At this
town.
point, we have most of those linked to the website. You can click through.
Most
You
of
may
them.
wanna
The,
review
the,
and
new,
make
the
sure
newest,
that-
the most
Yeah.
recent ones have not been, because the original ones were all part of that Heritage Places initiative. That was done by the province. That's why I did them. I was paid to do them at that time.
Well, when we're
Um,
putting this one up, maybe we'll do a review of the other
Yeah.
ones.
And maybe a little ribbon or a blast on the homepage. Like, ever wonder why
Yeah.
heritage homes are
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they are? Click here and find
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
and you
and
can
I-
see them all.
I appreciate your comments about that, because it's one of the things that the Heritage Advisory Committee has put on our sort of to-do list,
Yeah.
which is to have Deborah actually come in and talk about ways that the heritage issues on the town's website could be enhanced, or in that way, in that kind of way. for
Great
example.
timing. Yeah, we're looking at the website, so it's good timing.
Great. Okay,
Well, Deborah and I have worked together on these for many years now.
Councillor Bain?
I just said we have a motion.
We do have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Let's go to
And
the
thank you to the owners of the
16.
the biscuit eater,
Yeah.
Jessica Hepburn and her partner
Chris.
Chris, and their sister-in-law Beth for having agreed to do that, to register the property.
That was quite a fire they had.
Yeah, it sure was.
You remember that?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
79, but.
Well, no, I
I fought
just.
that fire.
Maybe you were all on ropes that night.
No, didn't know where the island was.
Yeah, it's very old. Didn't stop the ghost though.
Okay. The cemetery committee.
I think everybody's read the report. I'm not sure what a bollard is. Under maintenance report, second line, placement of a bollard on the, don't know what that's supposed to be.
Still scrolling up to.
Hmm.
Okay, well, I think that so.
Yeah,
Bollards, in that context, you'd be talking about is the sort of concrete salt box has a bunch of them. Anything that demarcates a parking spot, kind of.
Okay,
thing.
because we had discussed that. I just wasn't familiar
Yeah.
with the term, and I
The
didn't.
bollard is
get
probably just the cement, the metal post, is it not?
Well, yeah, it's any obstruction. So I don't know whether Derek was talking about it as a post or a barrier, but yeah.
back. And it's already in place.
And go ahead. Sorry,
Well,
Councillor.
I was just going to say, those that have read the minutes, a lot of it's pretty straightforward. I have not been able to get together with Mr. McKenzie regarding some of the trees that were dead trees, shrubs that have been there for years, and they just have to go. And it's just that we've never really taken the major step to get it done. I had marked them all, but the markings have all faded. I did meet with Valerie Herder, and we went up and looked at the area that was going to be grubbed off, which is
Mhm.
a bunch of little trees. They're quite enthusiastic about it, and are going to get back once they have looked at some kind of a strategy. I'd like it to be their program, which we will cooperate in, of course. And
That was Peter Dunker's suggestion. Remember he said to go
Yeah,
and pick up the trees?
I think that's who was up with us.
Oh, really?
Who lives on Fobo Road?
Oh no,
It's on
that's
your-
that's
Who is that? I know him, I met him.
DGA Schwartz. Not Peter Dunker. DGA lives
Yeah,
here.
no.
Peter Dunker was from
Yeah,
Halifax.
but anyway, we two
Yeah.
people up on the valley, and that went very well. And the other thing is, I was going to have a discussion with the CAO about what financial contributions could be done in conjunction again with the tree program. We just had a little brief discussion, and that's something that will go through the committee. And if we can mutually agree on some areas to plant some trees in the
Mhm.
cemetery and the appropriate type of trees, I know that they do have some thoughts on that for placement. We'll accommodate that. We're not encouraging, maybe on a perimeter, but nothing out in the middle where it impacts mowing and so on. In fact, we have a bylaw that people just can't go and plant shrubs. Deborah Trask, oh, okay, well then there's the donation thing. That is because, okay, very, very briefly, we do have some stones that are knocked over, not by vandalism, but just weather, stones and this sort of thing. Bob Morris, who's very knowledgeable of the families involved, if we can locate the if we could not locate the families and Bob knows that they're just never going to be available, we went ahead and resurrected some of the stones and getting a very good price. I think we did 8 or 9 for $1,000.
That's right. Put $100.
Incredible. And this time there's another 7 that we're going to look at, and there's 2 that are over that the people are known, and they will be contacted to see if they'll make a $100 donation towards resurrecting those.
The donation would come to
And,
the town, so the town would issue them.
Yeah.
Donation.
Yeah, the donation from the town going
Donation
into
would
the
come.
cemetery's fund.
Yes.
But it is charitable.
We would be
Yes,
eligible for a receipt. Another motion, you can see that was by Mayor Guinea, that we have Deborah Trask come in and assess some of the older stones that are subject to deterioration in Bayview Cemetery.
Can I just comment that the spelling?
This is something that had been done before, and we do have a report which we will make available to Deborah. The only other comment I will make is that the committee is very, very active, and we're getting very good response from our public sector on that committee.
Deborah's name.
Yeah, just the spelling of Deborah's name is Deborah.
So the minutes won't be corrected until it goes to cemetery, but we'll try to remember that when it does.
So whoever's there, just
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah, I should have
She's-
spotted that. Yeah.
She likes to have her name.
Well, my mom has the same
Yeah,
name and
yeah, I
feels
know,
the same
exactly,
way. So
My
exactly.
sister does too.
I think so many Deborahs do.
Yeah. They're highly insulted when they're not spelled properly. Okay. Planning Advisory Committee Special Meetings Policy Draft.
So this meeting was on May the 7th, and Dylan and Maureen. It doesn't state on the report itself who was present. What the presentation is, or what the draft policy is, was a consideration of special planning advisory committee meetings. We had a discussion about how to make them more efficient, to make sure that, or to validate that we wanted to continue to have special sessions, or whether we were going to adhere to a fixed schedule. And the report presented a number of options, and the draft policy really just spells out what the roles and responsibilities are, and what the parameters are for holding a special meeting or for refusing to hold a special meeting.
So are you making a motion on this, or?
So this is where my my memory and my notes are both failing me, because I have a recollection that we agreed, or we discussed asking the council to approve the policy.
So as I'm just wondering, as you're delivering this report, do you want to make a motion that council adopt this policy? You don't have to right now, but so it's sort of the usual thing when you're delivering a recommendation from a committee would be to.
Yes, and where I'm hesitant is that the options are still there, and the meeting was so long ago. So if you scroll up a little bit there, Dylan.
Yeah, I think that's really only attached to provide this policy.
To provide the policy.
So these are the options that Gareth
Okay.
outlined for the committee.
Oh, okay.
And
So
then I believe the committee selected the recommended on
to
the
recommend that we adopt it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I would move that council adopt the Mahone Bay Planning Advisory Committee policy for special meetings as presented.
Seconded?
I have a question.
Go
I
ahead.
certainly would support the motion, but I'm curious as to why it needs this special treatment, given that the Heritage Advisory Committee, for example, holds special meetings if we know that there is a contractor waiting to get on it, so we just call a special meeting. So is there something special about the Planning Advisory Committee situation that makes it different from what we do, or maybe we're doing it wrong?
I think I'll speak to that just a little bit. I think a big part of the rationale on this is that when there is a request, it's currently being handled in the same way as any committee at the discretion of the chair.
Mhm.
And in order to be consistent, I think, it is something that the chair has pointed out is we don't want to answer every request differently. We
Mhm.
want to have a consistent way to answer them. So this
Mhm.
essentially places constraints. There's still some discretion to the chair in this policy, but it places some constraints in terms of how those are going to be replied to.
Deputy Mayor?
Well, I guess I misinterpret this whole special meeting thing as Councilor Neal gave her presentation. And when I was at the meeting, we talked about, okay, we don't have an issue, we don't have to have a meeting, but we could do other issues, or people could bring stuff forward. But this, I will not support this policy, especially the way it's written, when an applicant can call for a council meeting or a committee of the town council. As we can have contractors contacting us from Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and Halifax for special treatment. And then you look at in the policy, it says 6 days before and 6 days after a regular meeting. Well, then that's only 15, 18 days till the next meeting. I'm sure nobody could be that pressed to get a permit or something. If it's a regular permit, they'll issue that in Chester. And you're not going to get anything done in 18 days. I don't think we need this. I think, as Councilor Carver's committee does, if there is a need for a special meeting, the chair calls it. Enough members can make it. We have the meeting. I don't think. And I was trying to think back when I read through this policy. I've been here a long time, and I can't remember the last time we had a special meeting. But that doesn't mean anything. I'm getting older every day. But I don't think this policy is necessary. So I would go for number 2 recommendation.
Well, I
We
think it,
did just recently move a meeting date, though, to accommodate an applicant.
We did?
Yeah.
Could you
Yeah.
enlighten me on that one?
Oh, it was March?
That was I think it was the May meeting.
Maybe even sooner.
so in my recollection of the discussion, this is really to put some formalization around what you've discussed as a very informal process that happens in other committees. And because the Planning Advisory Committee in particular has, financial ramifications for other parties that perhaps other committees don't share, that we felt that the layer of formality was a necessary layer. And it would make it much easier to describe, for example, when we will not be having a special meeting. So this actually allows us to not be at the whim of developers as much. So it protects us as much as it, facilitates flexibility in the process.
So
So you're gonna let an applicant come and call a meeting?
Request.
Request for
They
a request
make the
for a
request
meeting?
now.
What?
They make the request now.
Oh, I
but
know they
we-
do, but I just don't think that's proper procedure in my own mind, but that's.
I have
They
to
can
agree.
request
I
it.
have to agree with the deputy mayor. I can fully appreciate why we may want to establish criteria to assist the chair in making the determination as to whether or not a special meeting should be called. But not unlike the situation we have with Heritage Advisory, where there's money involved and contractors involved. It would be quite opposed to this policy that could put the determination for a special meeting in the hands of the person who's making the application, number one. there's only a very short window between the end of the 6th day when we had the meeting and 6 days before we have the next meeting, that if there was a bona fide reason why the special meeting should be called, I think the right now the chair has the authority to do that. So if there's any clarification that's required, it would be to possibly establish the criteria that would help you rationalize to the members of your committee why the special meeting is being called. Other than that, I couldn't support this particular policy.
I'm not reading this to say that the applicant is calling the meeting. The applicant may
requested.
put the request out, and the chair still retains all the authority in consultation with staff and, assessing.
But we create the expectation, I believe, on the part of the applicant that if I requested,
I'm gonna get
the
it.
chair is going to respond. I guess I don't see what's been happening with the PAC where there's a problem that needs to be fixed.
I would
With
say
this
it's more of an
policy
issue of
trying to
potential
address.
liability more than anything. If we don't have a policy on it and the chair is using their own discretion, if I was the chair, I would always grant or always reject all requests.
Mhm.
Because any difference in the way you do it is opening us up to potential legal challenge. So I think that to the chair, absence of specific direction, if I was the chair, would mean I would not want to accept or reject any requests unless I accepted or rejected all
All of
requests.
them. Indeed, and I think the context of that is that if we would, for example, enter a building phase in Mahone Bay where there was an awful lot of development happening, that this could either result in an awful lot of a large number of special meetings or a large number of people who are angry because there are not special meetings. And this allows us to be very precise.
Create a specific window.
I think this tells you all the reasons why you can refuse to have one, not telling you why you should have one.
Yeah, that is certainly the number 7 section, rejection of request, does presuppose that unless a request is being rejected for these reasons, that it would be accepted.
I think it needs more work. Simplification.
And I think if certain things to be noted by council, it would not be unreasonable to send it back to either staff or the committee for.
And I think the
Potential
chair is the one that has the authority in consultation with staff. And I'm thinking of the situation you had where the planners were struggling to meet a deadline and the meeting was postponed as a result. Totally reasonable call on your part to do that in consultation with staff. But it was you as the chair, right? I see that as part of your role.
Is there any mileage in thinking about developing a policy that could include the Heritage Advisory Committee?
I think it's an important note that in a specific circumstance that did just happen, there may be financial ramifications for the willingness of HAC to meet.
Yeah.
So that's the only other committee that I don't generally think this policy needs to apply to the meetings of all committees. I think the chairs should have the discretion, but where there are third-party financial interests,
and it's
I
that's the
think
issue,
a second reason perhaps to send this back would be,
yeah.
can we include HAC?
Yeah.
And
Or
I would imagine we can.
define a paragraph that works for your committee
yes,
and works for
yeah.
your committee
Right.
and satisfies our legal representation around the issue of liability for the town.
Yeah.
If I may ask a question for the notes, are we only thinking, if we look at other committees, and we were talking about issues where third-party financial interests may come into play, are we only talking about PAC and HAC at this point, when staff take this back? Is there anything else that we're thinking
Are you
of?
thinking of one in particular?
No, but it's late and I'm
Are there any other?
prepared to
No,
believe
it's
that someone
okay.
else's
Yeah.
thinking might be
I think we'll
sharper.
go, let's go with HAC, and we know PAC's got it. It appears HAC has a similar
We've
issue.
done it recently,
Then let's go with those two.
So, yeah,
So
And if there are any, we can always add them.
So do we want to ask
Does it come
the
up
Yeah,
for
it might be
cemetery
effective.
commission?
report to come back to council or to go back to PAC? Now that we have two committees on it, should we be asking staff to bring a revised report back to council at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
but I think staff needs to talk to the membership of PAC and HAC in the process of
Yeah.
developing that.
So
Right.
then if
Might it ever come up for economic development committee or cemetery commission?
That was going through my mind, but I think we're really getting into.
yeah, I mean,
Weeds.
as far as economic development committee, because it has a purely advisory to council role, I can't see it
Okay, it's
applying there.
advisory, yeah.
Cemetery, I mean, I could give a little thought to, but it has a more of a role to do with the operations, but it's a town-owned town business. I don't think so.
So it's the third party issue on this one that's the.
I think that's
Doesn't
a
appear to be.
big consideration. So right now, we're in discussion on the motion on accepting this policy. Obviously, with council having discussed wanting to consider some amendments to that,
Can we withdraw the
yeah, I was
motion
gonna say,
if
it
the
probably
mover
makes
and
more sense
seconder
to
agree?
withdraw
I would withdraw.
rather than
Yeah,
to vote
that's
on it.
fine.
Councillor
And-
Carver, okay?
And then maybe the same people want to make the
Right.
motion that we refer to staff and get a report considering these issues.
So yes, and I move that, council, refer this to staff to prepare a report.
I'll second that.
And seconded?
It's essentially item number
Okay, the
4.
motion is to refer this item back to staff. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay.
You never know what's going to be complicated.
No,
But
that's
that's the
right.
value of getting all the different views, right? We talked about it a lot with just some staff. And
Mahone Bay Pool Society, Councillor Feeney's not here. Anyone else feel comfortable speaking to that one? No? South Shore Regional Library Board. And then we come to 8-6.
Yep. I just want to point out that there is a new pamphlet for the program, which is quite handsome, and will be available to everybody. And also that that we've submitted an application to New Horizons within that very tight time window that they had between the time of announcement and their closing date, for funding to support an additional staff person for a period of a year to address more social isolation issues. So we'll see what happens. The response on that will be not until March, so that's quite a big delay. That's a long time from now.
It is.
Gracious.
Have to get through
Yeah,
Christmas
wow,
first.
yeah, it's a long time.
We have the accounts for approval. Accounts from May 19th, I think, is it? Yeah, still the 31st of May. Entertain a motion to approve the accounts as presented.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Bain. Questions on the accounts?
I do have a question. 42,000 to Chester. What was that? It's item number 017687.
it makes it bigger to be able to look at.
667.
Planning.
Services?
Was that planning?
Probably.
That would make sense. Wouldn't it?
That's certainly I would think.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I haven't got
Gosh.
to it yet.
How do they bill us? Well, how does that work?
Which page is, I'm just trying to find it.
It's on page 1, about halfway down, a little over halfway down, CAO.
Is there- yes, ma'am.
1667.
687 is the last three numbers.
Just right in the middle.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I don't know how it's invoiced, so I'm supposing that would be a large part of our annual amount.
Hmm.
But it may be invoiced in a large part, so I'll have to check on that. Yeah.
It's not a flat rate. They bill for services provided then.
Well, we do have a rate. We do have a
Mhm.
flat rate, yeah, but
Oh.
I don't think it's broken out into monthly payments. I'm not
I
sure
see,
how often we
okay.
pay it. Yeah. But we'll check on that. Maybe that's the base, and then we add to that for inspections and stuff. So that might be the whole annual base. I know it's not the whole budget, but it might be the whole annual base.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor of paying the accounts? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Entertain a motion to go in camera. Moved, seconded. All in favor? We'll go in camera in 5 minutes.
And Kevin, if you